As some of you know, each summer I am blessed by the congregation to have a few weeks sabbatical. I'm grateful to our NSCI leadership for this sacred time. And what I do with that time each summer is different, but there are constants. Time with family, if they're not too busy for me. Writing, reading, travel to places where I can see and reconnect with people, often people I don't get to see very often. And lest you worry that it's all serious, there's always some fun. So this summer I headed first to London. I celebrated the engagement of a dear friend and colleague. I went for her engagement party, but before I could get off the plane, she texted me and said, "We're going to the women's pond," that's the women's pond at Hampstead Heath, "to do a mikveh ritual." I said, okay. Created it on the tube on the way over, and it was pretty awesome. If you've ever been to the women's pond or the men's pond at Hampstead Heath, there are these beautiful enclaves of water surrounded by trees and grasses. And people swim. In the women's pond, women of all ages, all backgrounds, all levels of swimming, and it's just amazing swimming with the ducks and the lily pads. While in London, I saw an incredible exhibit of the Jewish feminist artist Judy Chicago, and I walked, and I walked again. I walked with memories of my semester there in college many years ago, connected with some more friends, and navigated art, culture, and some time to just be and think about where I am and how I've grown. On either side of that London visit, I caught a little bit of time with my children, and I attempted to support some packing, one heading to Oman to study Arabic and the other heading to Jewish surfing camp in Virginia. The one who was here hasn't had to pack. And then I headed to Israel. I had a week between one child leaving and the 17th birthday of two children. I wanted to be home for. And I have to be honest, I really wrestled. Should I go? I wanted to be in Israel. I felt I needed to be in Israel. And I also knew that I needed to breathe, and I wasn't sure how stressful it would be. I was nervous, but I listened to my soul, and I went. I walked off the plane when I got to Ben Gurion Airport, and I took a breath. I was there. The signs were in Hebrew. People were speaking Hebrew. I was there. I was home. I read the signs, responded to the passport control agent, and looked around and thought, well, the terminal looks the same, right? It's the same as it has for so many years since they redid it somewhere along the way. Soaring walls of light stone, windows, signage in Hebrew, a few million coffee places and currency stands. But it doesn't look the same. Those of you who've been there know. Along the downward sloping ramp to walk out to exit are signs, one at a time, with photos, each with the name of one of the hostages, in Hebrew and in English, and in bold red and white letters, "Bring him home now, bring her home now, bring them home now." I entered Israel as I have done countless times since I first was there at age 9. It was different. The faces of the hostages on those signs, images I've seen again and again, compelled me to look at each and every one as I walked toward the airport exit. I wanted to be in Israel. I needed to be in Israel. Indeed, I wrestled with going to Israel. And I was at last there, where I hadn't been in too many years. And to be honest, I didn't volunteer. I didn't go to the terror sites in the south. I didn't bring a group. I did nothing heroic. I can't even say that my attempts to help the economy made a dent. Why did I come, my friends asked, in the same breath as they thanked me for coming. Stam, I answered in Hebrew. Stam is a Hebrew word that kind of has no definition, but it basically means because. Stam, I wanted to be there for people who matter. Stam, I wanted to be in Israel. So I got in the taxi and I got to Jerusalem after some airline delays. Welcome to this summer. And I got to the hotel, dropped my bags, and I set out walking. I headed to Machane Yehuda, the somewhat covered outdoor market, which if you've been there on a Friday, you know there's no other place to be before Shabbat. It's that bustle of the energy before Jerusalem shuts down. The markets and stores shut down pretty much around 1. Few things remain open. I walked to Machane Yehuda, I got some fruits and produce and just took it all in. It was actually really crowded and that felt great. Went back to the hotel and then headed to walk to services. Another great thing about being in Jerusalem on Shabbat, walking. I went to Kol HaNishama, a progressive shul that always inspires and calms, and I took in the music and the insightful words of our colleague, Rabbi Oded Mazor, who, like our other Israeli colleagues, has been leading his congregation through uncharted days since October. He's been doing what we all do here, right? B'nai mitzvah, weddings, funerals, namings, Shabbos, holidays, and he's been supporting congregants who have kidnapped relatives, supporting congregants who are volunteering regularly to pick produce, who are facing the unknown. And each day, he drops his children off at school, his young children who attend a bilingual school of Israeli and Arab students. After services, I had Shabbat dinner with my friends, actually Rabbi Leisman's professor, Rabbi Dahlia Marks, and her family. Dahlia is the editor of the recently published Reform Prayer Book, an incredible scholar who's taught some of us. And Dr. Andrew Rehfeld, the president of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. Andrew, also an old friend, and Dahlia were talking about the incoming rabbinic, cantorial, and education students who are arriving the next week. And Dahlia explained that amidst her weekly teaching and studying and learning and being with her family, in her weekly schedule is now the weekly of protests. Indeed, every week after Shabbat and at other times as well in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and in other cities, there are protests. Different factions, some are together, some are separate. Those who are protesting the government, those who are protesting for hostage return, even division among there, protesting against settlements, some protest together, some separately. And I heard about the last year of the Hebrew Union College class. As many of you know, the first year of the Hebrew Union College curriculum is in Israel, so we all have studied in Jerusalem. The last year's class started last summer, and in October, we know what happened. Many of them stayed, and they became enmeshed in their community, not only going to class, but volunteering, becoming part of the Jerusalem and Israeli community in deeper ways. Saturday night after Shabbat, I joined friends for the protest because that's what my friends and so many others do on Saturday night. They explained to me the nuances of the groups protesting. They said, this group here, well, we're not sure we want to be with them. They're protesting the settlements, they're protesting Bibi, they're protesting to bring back the hostages. Many different signs. There was a walk of hundreds in Jerusalem. We gathered into particular places, first downtown at the top of Ben Yehuda Street, walked up, picked up another group, and then ended near the Prime Minister's house, where there were a number of speakers, family members of hostages, and renowned Israeli author David Grossman, who urged fellow Israelis to take to the streets and protest. Amazingly, I saw familiar faces. What does it say when a protest is the place to be on Saturday night? I walked with colleagues and friends, one couple whose son, son-in-law, and daughter's boyfriend have all fought in Gaza. My friend Rich, a rabbi and now therapist, said these kids, their kids and kids-in-law, have seen atrocities that have changed them forever. All have fought. Some are scheduled to go back. Even the father of their new granddaughter, who's a few months old. And this is what they do, his wife explained. Each week they meet up with friends and community, and they protest when Shabbat ends. I headed to Tel Aviv, where I visited with longtime friends, all of whom have children older than mine, children who are current Army age or post-Army age, not by so many years. As we did the things we normally do when we see each other, we shared meals, we walked in Tel Aviv, we walked on the beach, we sat in their homes. I listened more than I talked. I heard stories of their children. Children who had just finished military service, were about to go to university, and were called back up for Miluim, for reserve duty. Children who had delayed university, who had put off their honeymoons after a wedding, feeling it wasn't right to celebrate, and finally decided it was time to celebrate. Children who guarded the border, children who were not called back to serve, but who lost dozens of friends in the war. I watched my friends, their relief, their worry, even their guilt, as maybe their friends' kids weren't called back, but their friends' kids were. Watching their own children called to serve or not, and hearing that their friends' children were being called back or even returning to Gaza of choice, wanting to keep fighting. In their cars, at their tables, on our walks, I heard worry about the government, their fear about the country, their anxiety about what if there's a war in the north? Do we have enough soldiers? And they're wondering if the recent Supreme Court decision to call up the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredim, would actually hold water, would actually call them to serve. My friends who work in tourism, including a guide who, Rabbi Mason and Patty are here, Uri, who worked with you for how many trips, spoke about the lack of tourism. One guide said he doesn't have a trip till November. Someone else who plans tours said, well, there's no one to plan for. And indeed, if you walk on Ben Yehuda Street in Jerusalem or wander Jaffa, as I did on a Thursday afternoon, if you know what Israel looks like in the summer, it's different. It looks the same, but people aren't there as they are, what you would expect. One day I went to Anu, once the Museum of Diaspora Museum, now Anu, the Museum of the Jewish People. On its first floor, besides all the other amazing exhibits, is a small exhibit of Israeli creativity since October 7th. There's a statement at the front. It says, we're not trying to make a statement. We've just seen so much creativity burst since October 7th. We want to display it. There's an images of empty skies, images of crowded canvases that representational of fighting, blood. Representations of violence, videos, drawings, words lifting up. Art by living artists or those who were murdered on October 7th or those who died in the war. Residents of the South who've seen or experienced destruction and death. The goal to lift up this burst of creativity did just that. Beautiful, horrible, and sobering. Next day I went to Hostage Square, which is what the plaza outside the Tel Aviv Art Museum is called. Probably you've all seen an image of it. You've seen an image of the long table with seats marking a place for each of the hostages. There are a number of exhibits there. There's one of yellow chairs punctuated by a big sign that says Achshav, now. There's one of yellow doves. And then there are tents off to the side with family members of hostages and representatives of the kibbutzim that were attacked. There's even a merch table, but not for the heck of it. They're selling yellow ribbon stickers and posters that say things like bring them home now. Obviously the funds are going for good causes. And it's a space where there are protests regularly. I sat there for a while with a friend just taking it in, and then coincidentally, as I sat in this surreal scene, ran into one of my dearest friends from college who had just landed. She was there because her son had just finished his military training. He's what's called a lone soldier. His parents and family are in the States. I heard her joy and her pride that her son Adam is finishing his training, and I gulped, praying for his safety. From each of those experiences, I headed out onto the sidewalk to do normal things, to meet an old friend for ice cream, to see more art, to go to a gallery, to get coffee, to take a walk by the beach. Amidst the normalcy of each day, it seemed the same, but like at the airport, things might look the same, but then they don't. There are literal signs everywhere, hostage declarations, return them now. Demands. Out in front, it looks maybe normal, but beneath the surface, not so much. People do what they do. They make dinner, they build a house, they go to work, they interview for jobs, they teach students, they go to the beach. But just below the surface, nothing is normal. Sure, Israel's a different place. We in the United States don't live knowing that we're surrounded by enemies. We don't live assuming our children are entering the military, though some proudly choose to, and we honor them. And it's not all easy or rosy here. And the Israelis I spoke with were interested. They were horrified to hear about anti-Semitism, acts of hatred, and challenges on campus. There's no comparison. They're different. But they wanted to know and were upset to hear. In Israel on this trip, I was always looking and listening, more than usual. Indeed, all around, people were bustling and it seemed normal. But people weren't there, like at the airport. I'm glad I went, not happy in a joyous ha-ha way, but I know that it was right and good to be there, to speak Hebrew, to see people, to give hugs, to learn, to ask questions. And as well to remember just how Israel is important to me. Realize that my first visit was 50 years ago when I was in 4th grade. You can do the math. I don't think my takeaways are profound. I'm sorry if you expect that. But they are, like my reasons, stam. They simply are. My takeaways are, to me and to you, go. Go if you can. Talk to your friends and family. Don't stop. But more important than talking with them, listen to them. And here, speak out for what matters to you. Support organizations and the economy in any way you can, and step back also and remind yourself why Israel is important to you. Why are you connected? How are you connected? Feel it, recall it, and tell your family, friends, and colleagues that Israel does matter to you. Then figure out how to act on it today, tomorrow, the next day, and the day after that. Shabbat Shalom.